Hey there guys, welcome to this long-awaited motion tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to be breaking down each of these scenes which I created in my motion video. Just so you know, all of these scene files are available to download in the link description. So let's go ahead and power through. We're going to start off with our first scene file here. So let's jump into Cinema 4D and get started. So here we are inside of Cinema 4D with our first scene file. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to be creating. So you see here we have some nice metal ball and some globular stuff going on with some nice stripes. And if we take a look at the original scene file, this is what we have, which doesn't look too great at the minute. But this can be made in literally 5 minutes. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's make a new project file. What we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and grab a sphere. And all we're going to do with this sphere, we're going to drop it into a clone object. And we just need to go ahead and change some of the settings in the clone object. So firstly, the mode, we're going to go ahead and change that to a grid array, sorry, and then let's play around with some of these values and maybe make the sphere a little bit smaller. And we're also just going to drop the count on the bottom so we only have 2 layers of it. And we can also maybe reduce some of these as well. We don't want anything too big, so maybe this is about good. So we'll have 3, 2, 2, and we're just going to change the size, but this doesn't matter too much at the minute. Now, once you have this, obviously nothing is going to happen, so we're going to go ahead and change it so they're all floating around and moving and intersecting and stuff like that. Now, how do we do that? What we need to do is click our cloner and we need to go to MoGraph, Effector, Random Effector. And you'll see now that they're going to be moving all over the place. So under the Random Effector, we just pull this up. We can go to our parameters and we can change some of these positions. And under our Effector, we need to change our random mode to noise. And this is straight away going to give us some animation, as you can see here. Now that's a bit quick for the minute, so let's go ahead and change this down to a bit slower, maybe 30%. But this is all completely up to you. It depends how much movement and speed you want in your scene file. Maybe about 30, and we'll increase this to 45. And if we go back to our parameter, we can go ahead and change these positions up a bit, just so that we get a lot of movement happening here. We'll also zoom out a bit. And what we can do, we can also change the scale for a uniform scale. And we'll just add this uniform scale and we'll maybe scale it down a bit. Also add a absolute scale, so they're all going one way. And you'll see now we're getting something a bit crazy. So after we've done this, we can go ahead and drop it into a meta ball. And that's just going to make it look nice and globular. So if we click our cloner, and we'll go to this tab here, and we'll grab a meta ball, and we'll just shove the cloner under the meta ball. And then this is going to give you this great big ball looking type thing. And what we can do, we can go ahead and play with some of the values. So the whole value, maybe just drop this in a bit, just so it's a bit tighter. And the editor subdivision, depending on how quick your computer is, we can drop this down just so we get a more accurate view on what we're going to have. And now you can see we're starting to get the effect that we had originally. And we can actually go ahead and make that a bit slower. So animation speed, maybe 35. So we're getting something a little bit slower. And we can also grab our meta ball and we're just going to play with the rotation. So if we grab our rotation tool, we'll go to frame 0, we'll add a keyframe here. And we'll go to the full 90 frames and we're just going to spin it around a little bit. Not too much, and we'll add another keyframe. And if we also grab these keyframes here, just by highlighting it, and the interpolation, we're going to change it to linear, and the first one to linear. And you'll see now, we're getting this nice cool effect, and we can go ahead and change these objects around, like the whole value, depending on how blunt out you want it to be. So that's looking good to me. And so now we need to go ahead and add our materials. Now this is where the important factor comes in. So we'll go down here, we're going to create a new material. We'll double click on this. Now what we need to do in here is if we turn off our specular and we'll go onto our color, we're going to go ahead and create a gradient. And we'll just click on the gradient here. Now depending on what color you would like, I'm just going to go for a nice orange, and we're going to have some nice orange stripes happening. And click OK, so it's similar to the original. We'll add a white. Oh, there we are. And then we'll add another orange, another white. And if you click Control, hold down Control, and then click on the color, you can copy it. Click on the white, Control, we'll click on the orange. And you'll see now we're just creating these faded stripes at the minute, and we'll add one more here. And if we just evenly get these right. And then if we click our little arrow just opposite gradient here, we can go down to the interpolation again and see where it says smooth knot. We'll click on that, we'll just go ahead and change it to none. And you'll see now you're getting this nice harsh stripy looking effect. And if you just go ahead, maybe even these out a little bit as much as you can. Just like so, like that. And that is all done for the color. So if we right click on our color, and we're just going to copy this channel. And what we're going to head and do is add, so we have an alpha channel. So we'll come down to the alpha here, we'll just check this on. Move around here. And we're just going to paste that channel on top. And if we actually copy the texture on the color channel, my bad. Copy channel. And then down to alpha, on the texture, we'll click the arrow. And we're going to go ahead and click paste channel. And you'll see now, we're getting this sort of ghosting effect inside here. So if we go ahead and turn off the soft checkbox, now we're getting these nice stripes happening here. So we can add this to our globular texture. And you'll see now we're getting somewhere. You can see some cool lines and stuff happening. And if we go back inside our texture, just make sure this is all right, so all of these are even. And that is pretty much it for inside here. So now we're going to go ahead and animate our stripes. So on our meta ball, we'll click our texture, and you can go ahead and change the length to make the lines actually thinner. As you can see there, it's getting a little bit rough on the edges. We'll sort that out later. And we'll just get it to however you want. But now we can go ahead and animate. So if we go to the frame 0, we'll click on our texture. We're going to hold Control and click on Offset U. And we'll click the little circle next to that. So we've added a keyframe. Now we can go to our end of the animation, and we're just going to increase this to maybe about 80%. Hold Control and we'll click that again to set another keyframe. And you'll see when we play this, now we're getting these cool stripy, globby looking effect happening here. And you'll see we have some quite rough edges on the out here, but that's nothing to worry about. That's just because our editor subdivision is quite low, so if we increase this, we're getting some nice smooth stripes happening there. Obviously, the lower you have this number, the slower your render is going to be. So if we just increase that on our render subdivision, we can maybe put that down to maybe about 3. And you'll see that is how I created the initial scene inside of Cinema 4D, and I'll get to the After Effects part later. So that's our first scene file done. We'll go ahead and close these. And now let's move on to our second scene file next. So here is our next scene file. You see we've got some nice circular stuff happening, some nice dots out the side. This was really easy to do in Cinema 4D, sorry. And here is our original scene file. So if we come out of our camera, you can see it's made up of some simple animating and some tubes. And then a nice corner for the circles on the outside. So let's go ahead and start making this from scratch. So the first thing I did is I went into the shapes, and we're going to make a tube. And we're going to change the orientation to plus or minus X. Either way, it doesn't really matter. And then we can go ahead and start changing some of the settings on here. So the inner radius, we can increase that just so we've got a nice outer ring. Make it however thick you want. And we can go ahead and drive our slice effect there. So if we click the slice tab and we'll check that, you'll see this here is where all the animating happens. So if we keyframe our 2, we'll set that to 0. Again, click Control or hold Control and we'll click on the little keyframe. And we're going to skip to the end and click the keyframe again. And you'll see when we, oh no, actually, on our end keyframe, we'll change this back up to 360. And that's going to make our full circle. We'll just click Control, click that again. And you see when we run this through, we are now making our first tube. Now to make this a little bit more dynamic, we can go ahead and change the keyframe interpolation. So we'll click our tube, we'll go to Window, Timeline, and we're going to drop this down. And you'll see here is where our keyframe happens. So what I did in the original video is I had the start animation come on really quick and then it slows down towards the end. So you'll see if we make this a little bit bigger, our animation starts off here, comes in nice and quick, and then towards the end we just slow down to the end. And you'll see when we play this through, it's quick at the start, shoots around quick at the start, and then finish. Now after I created this one tube, I went ahead, I held Control, click on that and drag it down and make a copy, hit T on the keyboard and we can go ahead and scale this down. And in this tube we can go back to our Object tab and we can play around with the various heights, the outer radius and the inner radius. So now we have a copy of that. But what we want to do is change some of the keyframes. So if we go back to our Window, Timeline, and we'll open this up here. We don't want these two keyframes to be exactly the same. We want some dynamic and some difference in there. So on our second tube, we can maybe slow this one down. On our end tab, we'll play around here, just so they're not completely the same, and we'll go ahead and play this through again. And you'll now see we're getting some variety in there. And again, we'll hold Control and we'll drag it down, we'll make another one. We'll make it a lot smaller, we'll make a nice thin one in this. Increase the inner radius. And actually what we can do on this one, on our third tube, we can change the orientation to be plus X or the other X. So now we're getting the opposite effect happening. And you can see that we're just slowly building up the effect. Also what we can do here, if we grab another shape, we'll grab a sphere, hit T on the keyboard for the scale, and we're going to really make this small. And then we'll grab a MoGraph corona object, shove the sphere inside the corona, and the mode of the corona, we're going to have a radial to keep the theme of the circle. And again, we can increase the count and the radius, and we can change the plane to ZY, so we have the same orientation. We'll just scale up the radius, maybe have a few more, we'll increase the count. And the sphere, we're going to make them a little bit smaller, like so. And this is all personal preference, so that looks pretty good to me. Now to animate this, we'll go back to the start as always. On our corona object, we can go to the start angle and the end angle. On the end angle, we'll set this to 0. Hold Control, click the keyframe. We'll go to the end of our animation at 90 frames. And we'll change the end angle back up to 360 degrees and we'll hit enter. And again, remember to hold Control and click the keyframe. And now you see we can start making this dynamic looking circles and spheres happening. Just like so. Now a few more touches we need to do is add our material. So if we double click again, and we'll make our simple material. All I did was I went to the color, added a nice orange effect, click OK. Our luminance, we're going to do the same. Add some nice bright vivid orange, OK. And we're just going to increase or decrease the brightness of the luminance to maybe 50%. And we'll also turn off our specular. And we'll just drop this on each of our spheres and tubes. Now, I want it to be front on, just so we don't get any sort of perspective. So if we grab a new camera, and we'll hit the little title safe here to make it white. And under the projection, where it says perspective, we can change this to front. Or actually, maybe left, yeah. Depending on the orientation. Just go ahead and line that up with our scene. And now you can see we're creating this tube effect happening here. Obviously it's a little bit different in the final video, but you can be as creative as you want. And again, remember when you render this out in our render settings, make sure to have the alpha channel checked on if you want to change the background and stuff like that. So that's scene file number 2 done. Remember this is in the link description to download. And let's go ahead and move on to the third one. So here we have our third scene file. We got some sort of glitchy polygon looking effect happening. This one was really simple to make. It involved one object. We'll take a look at the original scene file here. And you'll see this is all it is. This is really, really simple to make, so let's go ahead and do it. Under our new project, we're going to go ahead and grab a shape. Grab a landscape object. We'll make it spherical, so we're getting this rough looking texture here. So what we can go ahead and do is change our sea level, so we're going to bring that in. Just like so. We can also decrease our segments, so we're getting a more polygon type look. And we're just going to play around with the various looks, just like so. If we grab our scale object, we're just going to scale this in. Keep playing with the sea level objects. Just so we're doing this. Maybe increase the size on the Y. So now we're getting this weird looking shape. And also on the landscape object, you'll see this little tag here, which is the Phong tag. And we can change this to check it to an angle limit. And this, if we decrease it, you'll start to notice we're going to see more of the flat surfaces. So you can change this however much you want, maybe something like that. Now we need to go ahead and animate it. So we'll go to frame 0. I'm going to change our scale. So we'll maybe have it on 1. Hold control, we'll hit the keyframe button on the scale. Go to frame 90 at the end. And we're just going to change this up a little bit, maybe 1.5. And again, hold control, hit the keyframe button. And you'll see now we're getting some animation happening here, which may be a bit too quick, so let's go ahead and slow that down to maybe 1.3. Or hold control will reset the keyframe. So now we're getting some animation. And if you see in the original example, we've also got some nice spinning motion happening. So if we go on here, we'll hit R for rotation. We'll go to frame 0, hit a keyframe, go to our last frame, and we can spin it on one single axis. So we'll spin it on this axis. Remember to hold shift to lock it into place. And we'll maybe do 190 degrees. We'll let go, hit another keyframe. And as always, we'll grab a camera. And we're going to change this to the perspective that we want. So maybe front. We'll line that up to the middle. And you'll see now we're getting the same look here. If we actually go ahead, play around with some of these other various settings. just to get it how you want. You can change the sea level to bring this back up. You can reduce some of the segments. And as always, we'll double click here and we're going to make a new material. Same as before, grab a nice orange. Again on the luminance, we'll check this on. Add a nice orange. And we'll just decrease it a bit and turn off the specular. And done. We'll shove that on. And here we have our moving polygon looking effect. So that one's done. Time for number 4. Let's get started. So here is our original scene file for our scene number 4. And you'll see all this is some metaballs and some random effectors. Again, this is really simple to create, so let's go ahead and get started. We'll click Control N for a new project. And we're going to grab a sphere, MoGraph coiner. Going to coin the sphere a couple times. We'll shove it in a grid array. And we don't really want too many, so we'll put the count to maybe 2 by 2 by 2. We'll change the size. Maybe add a third one on the y-axis. And we're also going to hit T on the sphere just to scale these down a little bit. So that's done. We're going to go and add a MoGraph effector, random effector to move these around. We'll maybe just bring these in a little bit. Under random, I'm going to add the random mode of effector to noise to get some basic animation. Again, the animation speed, maybe you can decrease that. Go to our parameter, we can move these around a bit, depending on how crazy you want it to look. Also add the scale, uniform and absolute. We're just going to make these a bit smaller. If we actually change the animation speed a little bit slower to 50%, and the parameter we can change the height just so it doesn't change too much. So now we're getting this look. Can also maybe add some rotation, but it's not going to make much of a difference. So that's looking good to me. Again, we'll go to this tab here, add a metaball, shove the coiner inside the metaball. Whoops, and we'll have that here. Under our random effector, under our metaball, sorry, we're going to maybe increase the hole value. So we're getting this look. We'll just decrease this for now to 20%. And again, as it's playing, you can go back to the random effector and just play around with some of the values to see what it's going to look like. So you're seeing the original. The middle one doesn't have too much movement, so let's just bring these back in a little bit and we'll increase the hole value. Or decrease it, sorry. And again, on the original, you can see we've got these other little ones sprouting off. So let's go ahead and do that. Again, we can probably just copy this metaball object. And under the coiner, we'll go to effectors and we'll just delete this effector. And we'll go to MoGraph, effector, random. We'll add a new one, a separate one. And make sure under the second coiner we've got that random. So we'll call this 2 and we'll call this 1. And we'll also rename that that. So these two are together and these two are together. Now under our second random effector, in the original you can see they're going quite high on this axis. Let's increase this y-axis. And also we'll go to the effector tab and we'll change the random node back to noise just so we get some basic animation. And obviously that's too quick, so we'll change the animation speed down. And we'll also maybe increase this a little bit more. Maybe that's still too quick. Change that down to 40. 40 looks good. Go back to the parameter, maybe lower this a little bit. And finally, under our second metaball, we'll open these tabs and we're just going to make the sphere a little bit smaller. Just so we're getting these little particles coming off. And under our meta ball we can also maybe increase this a little bit. And again, finally add our famous material. We'll go into the color, add some orange. Hit OK, luminance, turn it on. Add some orange. Brightness down to 50% and turn off our specular. And we'll shove this on our coiner, or our meta ball, sorry, on 1 and 2. And again, that is how I made this one, like that. So that's scene 4 done. Let's move on to scene 5. So here is our next scene. We'll go ahead and run this through. We have a nice abstract sound effector looking effect, but actually all we used was some plane effectors. So this is again really easy to do. Take a look at our original project file. Here we have it. And all it is some basic cues and effectors. So Control N, let's go ahead and make this. I'm going to start by grabbing a cube. And we're just going to make like a couple bar looking objects. Maybe thin this down. So we're going to be looking at it from this perspective. Maybe make this a little bit thinner. And when that's done, we need to make a whole bunch of them. So click on our cube, go to MoGraph and Coiner. Drop the cube in the Coiner. And on the Coiner effector, we'll go to Object. And we're going to go ahead and change the position from 0 on the Y. And we're going to increase it on the X. So maybe about 200. And we'll increase the count. Actually, we'll maybe bring this down. We'll add a few more in the count. We'll move it into the middle. And that looks about good. We don't want too many at the minute, so we'll just leave it around here. And this is the basic structure for what we're going to be making. So what we need to do is go onto our cloner, MoGraph, effector, plane effector, and you see the whole thing's going to jump up. So we go ahead and change the Y value down to 0. And what we want to affect is our scale on the Y, which is our tallness. So what we can do is make this one kind of large, maybe 0.8. And to animate this, we'll go to our fall off tab, and on the shape we'll change it from infinite to linear. And actually, if we scale this up, actually, yeah, and then we'll change the orientation to X, and you'll see now we're getting a nice effect happening. But actually we can change the shape from linear, we can change it to a sphere, and that's going to get a nice fall off on both sides. So on these tab here we can increase the fall off, play around with the scale, go back to a parameter. We can also maybe make this a bit bigger. And to simply animate this, we're just going to start it off here, make sure we're on frame 0, like so. We're going to click our keyframe tab down here, go to the last frame, and we're going to move it across to maybe, yeah, we'll move it to the end. And you'll see now when we play this through, we have a basic animation. We want it to be a little bit more crazy than that, so we'll maybe go to frame 25, we'll click our plane effector, going to shove it across here, click the keyframe button again, we'll move forward a couple frames, move it back over here, go here, we can again, we can move it anywhere. Just get a little bit creative. So now you're going to see we've added some nice randomness in there. And again, what we can do, click on our coiner, MoGraph, effector, plane effector, and we'll do the same again. So we'll position down to 0 our scale on our Y. Let's make this one maybe a negative value, so negative 0.6. Go to our fall off tab and we'll change this again to a sphere. We'll go ahead and scale this up. Maybe squash it a little bit. and we just need to animate. So if we go to our starting frame, hit the keyframe, we'll scrub forward, we'll move over here, add another keyframe, keep moving forward, and we'll just shove this here, and we'll follow it back over here. Now you'll see we're getting some nice random effects happening, as you can see here. So again, one more time, we're just going to add another MoGraph effector, plane effector, and we'll make sure, if we go to our corner on our effective tab, we'll just make sure that's on there. Same as normal, decrease the Y to 0, make sure the checkbox for the scale is on, and for this one we can maybe make a negative value by -7. So we'll get something like this. Again, fall off, change the shape to sphere, increase our scale, and we'll squash it in. And this one we'll keyframe it at 0, maybe move over here, move it over here, keep scrubbing through, just so we get some nice random looks happening. And now when we play this through, we're getting some really crazy stuff happening. Now just to finish this off, again we'll add one more plane effector, so we'll go to our coin, MoGraph effector plane, go to our parameter tab, and we'll change this to 0 again. However, on our scale, make sure it's a uniform scale. Actually no, not a uniform scale. Just on our y-axis we're going to change this down to 0. Sorry, -1, just so we can't see it, completely flat. However, on this we'll go to our fall off, we'll change it to a sphere. We'll increase this up, just so we're touching the edge. And we're going to go ahead and change it to an invert. So if we bring this in, our edges are just going to be pinched in towards the edges. And that gives it that nice sort of smoother look. And actually, if we go to our filter, and we'll go down to deformer, just so we can turn those off. And you'll see this is the effect that we're starting to create. Now just to add a nice bouncy effect, what I did in the original, if we click on our corner, MoGraph effector, and we can add a delay effector. And under our effector tab we can increase the strength. And under the mode we can change it to spring, and you'll see when we play this now, we're just going to get a nice bouncy look happening, and you can increase this. And you see now it all bounces around, which gives it that more dynamic feel. Finally, we will add our color, and we should be done. So again, luminance, orange, decrease, specular off. Add that onto our corner, and then if you just position your camera, that is how I created that scene file. Right, that is that one done. We now have one more, and that is the final one, and after that we'll move on to the After Effects part. So here is our final scene file, which is probably the most complex one, because it uses a couple dynamics tabs. And that is it. So let's take a look at the original. We'll just play this from the start here. You'll see we have a bunch of balls falling down, and they sort of fill up towards the bottom. And you'll see when we render this out, this is the look that we're going for. So if we actually come out of our camera right now, we have a lot of stuff happening. What we can do is actually turn these back on just so we can see what's happening. This is what I created. Now it's actually not too confusing if we just pan around here, and we'll go inside here. This is what we're going to be making. So all I did, if we go back to our frame 0, you'll see we have a string of particles here. If we go back and just turn these off, and also that one, we have a string of particles, which is, not particles, spheres, sorry, inside of a pointer object. And what they have is a dynamic tab with a floor. And then basically I built up out of cubes. We'll turn these back on. I basically built like a funnel type of effect. Also turn these ones on. So yeah, I added these down here so they couldn't escape out the sides. And you'll see if we play this, they all fall down, they hit the sides, and they build up on the back wall here. We'll turn that on. And we also have a front wall in front of that. And then what I did is I just clicked this bottom red button here so it can't be seen when it's rendered. And you see they're falling down, falling down, falling down, all collecting up here. So that's very simple to make. You just make a funnel out of a bunch of shapes, and then on the shapes that you want the balls to collide with, I added a collider tab. So you do that by right clicking on the cube, simulation if you're in R13, and we'll go to collider body. And then that's just going to add that collider tab so the balls can't get through. And then after that, I made myself a camera. We'll turn these off just so we can't see them. We'll hit play, and the balls come down, and you can see that they're collecting up there. And if we just render that out, we used our standard material through our color and our luminance, and then I just went ahead and rendered that out. So once I'd had them rendered, I imported them into After Effects, and I'm going to show you the work that I did inside there. So here we are inside of Adobe After Effects, and this is the original project file that I did. And let's go ahead and start soloing layers. So I started off with a nice white background, and then for the introduction I used some text and a shape layer, which is a simple sphere. If we have a look at the keyframes, I just keyframe the position from the left onto the right. And for the text, to animate it on like that, if we hit U, I have a simple scale on each letter, which animates on, just so we get that nice smooth motion. And as the beat kicks in, we have our first render. So let's go ahead and take a look at that, which is here. We'll add that on. This is what we rendered out from Cinema 4D. If we go to our effects and controls, there's nothing on there. And what I did to make it more abstract is I added my logo over the top. So if we just add that back on, and I matched the color to the background just to give it a nice abstract look. And again, we used our second one, which is here. This is what it looked like before the logo. We added that on. Next, we added this polygon one, which we rendered out earlier. And then we added that one, this one, and finally our complex one at the end there. And actually on this one I added a real smart motion blur, just so we can get some nice blur happening at the top. And that was basically it. I just ordered them one by one. And actually we can take a look at our watermark. This is our logo that I quickly made inside of Photoshop. It's just my logo cut out from a circle. So we get this nice effect. These shape layers are what I used to add my name at the end. As you can see, they scale on there. And that's just a simple scaling from 0 up to a larger number, just so it completely covers. And again, I use that same effect from the start with the square, which was animated on, and I added my name. But inside of After Effects, after I completed it, I realized I didn't really like the really bright, vivid orange as much. So I added an adjustment layer, I added a hue and saturation to that adjustment layer. I just decreased it slightly to get a more faded orange. And also we added a curves just to bring up it a little bit more so we can get a nice faded, more abstract look. And as you can see there, we have a sort of washed out effect. And after that was done, it was all completed. I added on my music to match that, and I went ahead and rendered it out, and I finally created my motion. So we can go ahead and watch this through one more time. We've gone inside After Effects, we've explained how this is done. We've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there should also be a 6 there. There it is. So that whole project took me maybe an hour or two to make. As you can see, it was really simple, but you get this nice effect happening. It looks nice and clean, you have nice music to go with it. And really I was just trying to be creative inside of After Effects and Cinema 4D in creating various looks to go with my logo. So I hope this video helped you. Remember to request more tutorials and stuff like that. Remember to leave a like and comment on this video on what you want to see. And yeah, I really hope it helped you out. I'll see you guys soon. Bye guys.